Did I tell you my mother's here?
This time we watched Season 7, Episode 1, Night of the Blood Beast, with the short Once Upon a Honeymoon.
I wish I didn't have to watch this movie, but I am glad that, Beth, you're here. Yay!
Yay! Adam's swamped with other work right now. I needed to get away from my children. It worked well for everybody.
Well, we're glad to have you back. How are you doing? How is the world treating you right now?
I'm feeling pretty optimistic these days, actually.
Well, good.
Much like our short, I'm feeling positive about the future in some ways.
Well, and most of the things in that short did turn out to be true, but before we get to that, our good buddies, the Mads, have done it again. They've done quite a lot. First off, they've got a YouTube channel now. Link in the show notes. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if you follow us on Twitter.
Do I not follow you on Twitter?
I have no idea. If you follow It's Just a Show on Twitter at It Is Just a Show. I also know you're not like super on Twitter, so there you go.
I'm mostly a lurker, but I should be lurking on It's Just a Show. So I will go do that.
Well, also, Twitter is not the best at showing you everything on its timeline. But, yeah, they've started up their own YouTube channel, and they put up all the shorts from their most recent shorts compilation onto it. And I haven't had a chance to explore it all because, of course, I've seen them. But I'm super excited it's there. And I'm really hopeful that they drop a few, video essays and vlogs and a few other fun things that you get to do when you're a YouTuber.
I'm so glad that they're doing this.
But in addition to that, they also just did a few weeks ago, they did The Choppers, starring your friend and mine, Arch Hall Jr.
Man, he did a lot of movies.
He did a handful of them, certainly.
More than I would have expected of somebody who didn't really seem to want to be an actor.
No, well, this is another one written and directed by his father, much like Ega, which we covered a million years ago. I don't know if you had a chance to see it.
No, I did not.
You've been a little busy. It was a bad movie in which Arch Hall Jr. is part of a gang of teens who go around finding cars that have been abandoned on the side of the highway while people go out and get gas or whatever, and then strip them for parts. That's what a chopper is in this case. And it's about how they try to avoid the law.
Well, that's actually a pretty interesting premise, but of course it's a typical teen phobia. Is that even a word I can use of the 50s?
Oh yeah, there are scenes sort of right out of an Ed Wood movie where they talk about the problems of the teens today, and it's got that kind of framing device. It's a bit ridiculous. Also, of course, it's an Arch Hall movie, so there's songs. There's songs. They're really terrible songs that there's no reason for them to be in the film even. In fact, there's one scene where he's in the car sort of waiting for a heist to happen, so to speak, and is bopping along to his own song on the radio.
He's a triple threat. He can sing, he can act, he can have great hair? Is that what he's going for in this movie?
He's got the same hair he always does, the same facial expression he always does. It's the same Arch Hall Jr. It's just the same. It was, of course, a lovely riff. It was very funny. And as always, it's great when you get to see Trace go blue.
Oh, yes. We didn't get very much of that during the run of the show.
No, there were very few F-bombs dropped in the show. And that just makes it even funnier to hear them now. And of course, they've announced their next film, which is going to be Phantom from Space, which they've never done before. I don't know anything about it.
Does anybody?
But it's got a great poster of a sort of astronaut carrying a woman.
Which I gotta say, even this movie, Night of the Blood Beast, in which there is maybe one scene of woman carrying, that is the poster. You had to have it. If it was a sci-fi movie, you had to have a fainting woman being carried by a weird monster. That was just the way it had to be.
Yeah, it's compelling. I don't know. I want to be carried by a gentle monster from outer space.
You know what? Me too.
Okay. Well, unless there's something else, we should probably get to talking about this movie and this episode. It's going to get complicated here in Summary Land. So buckle in, friends. This time we watch Season 7, Episode 1, Night of the Blood Beast.
But first, a short called Once Upon a Honeymoon. The film begins on Cloud 7, where a conference of angels are discussing the problem of Jeff and Mary, whose hot and heavy honeymoon plans are about to be doused with cold water. The bespectacled angel Wilbur is on the case to ensure everything glides back into place. We dissolve onto Earth, and sure enough, Jeff and Mary are just about to leave the house when Jeff gets a call from his boss, Gordon, who tells them that one of their clients needs a new melody for a song. Fast forward to many hours later when, dejected and suffering from writer's block, Jeff broods at the piano. Mary tries to lift both their spirits with food and cigarettes, but becomes frustrated by trying to cook with her out-of-date appliances. She makes the fateful wish for a decent kitchen, and that's when Wilbur takes over, spattering around angel dust to transform Mary's humble abode into a futuristic fantasy-scape. But Mary doesn't stop there. She also dreams into reality hip new looks for her bedroom and living room, all of them furnished with state-of-the-art Bell phones. The short climaxes with Jeff drawing inspiration from the rhythm of Mary's clickety-clacking on their old rotary phone. His new tune, A Castle in the Sky, wows their clients so much that Gordon instantly orders Jeff and Mary back on their honeymoon. And with that, the couple dances out the door. Thanks, Wilbur, and thank you, Bell Telephones.
And now, our feature presentation. Well, we've got a man in space, and we got a problem. Now we got a man who's rapidly plummeting to Earth, and he lands, conveniently, in the US, and his team drives out to check the wreckage, and he's dead. But he's not, properly dead. There's no rigor mortis. Weird. So they take him back to the lab, and they check his cells under the microscope, and, oh, hey, there's some super weird and angry-looking cells in his blood. And then the power goes out. Oh, and there's a creature that breaks into their compound and kills the old Dr. Boss guy. So weird. Oh, should they kill the creature? Well, it did kill their boss, but the no longer dead astronaut argues that the creature's an alien and that it comes in peace. Well, eventually it turns out that the astronaut has been impregnated by the alien. So that's weird too. Well, eventually the astronaut and all his friends go out and parley with the alien. The alien tries to convince them that he comes in peace, but then it becomes kind of clear that he intends to impregnate more people and radically change humanity. Also, he's kind of gross looking. So the humans agree to kill him, and they do. And the alien says in his last words that more aliens will be coming. So look forward to a sequel, I guess. But for now, it's the end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, the episode premiered at the end of a Turkey Day marathon, and during that marathon, Dr. Forrester announces his intention to conquer the world before his mother arrives for a visit. But what's this? Deep 13 is visited by, quote, America's most literate correspondent, unquote, Jack Perkins, played by Mike Nelson. It turns out TV's Frank had invited a bunch of guests over for Thanksgiving before ascending to heaven at the end of season 6, and leaving Dr. Forrester in the lurch. The subsequent skits find Jack Perkins joined by Mr. B. Natural, Pitch the Devil, Kitten with the Whip, and for some reason, Michael Feinstein. By the time Pearl Forrester shows up, everyone is quite soused, and we start our episode with a brand new opening sequence. In the first segment, and on a very different looking Satellite of Love from the previous Comedy Central episodes, Mike and the Bots talk about the big game, though it's not entirely clear what sport this big game consists of. Returning from commercial break, everyone's wearing a different sport ball hat and still discussing the big game before checking in with the Mad, who's in the middle of grooving along with his Deep 13 shindig until an unimpressed Mrs. Forrester asks if the people on the view screen are part of Star Trek Voyager. But then she zeroes in on Crow and identifies him as her beloved friend, Art. Apparently the two share a history, and Pearl exclaims that she feels much better about this whole experiment thing, knowing he's involved. She then proceeds to bail out her son, who has forgotten to spool up an actual movie, by digging Night of the Blood Beast, accompanied by an unnamed short, out of her purse. In the next segment, Crow and Tom discuss which Thanksgiving side is better, stuffing or potatoes. Stuffing is clearly favored, with potatoes being described as the Norwegian rat of the vegetable kingdom, spreading typhus and gonorrhea as it jumps from ship to ship. In the next segment, Pearl takes a break from the party for a tete-a-tete with Art to express her profound disappointment with her offspring, Dr. Forrester. But she nevertheless commits to supporting his efforts to take over the world. As she puts it, A mother has to support her son no matter what a loser he is. After another movie break, Mike and the bots are about to dig into their Thanksgiving repast when they discover Crow is missing. He has somehow snuck out to have dinner on Deep 13. Everyone takes a moment to give thanks before the meal starts. Pearl expresses her gratitude for my son, I guess, and Dr. Forrester gives thanks for his friends, who, he stresses, will be leaving immediately after the meal. In the final sequence, Crow is back on the SOL and starting a debate over mincemeat versus pumpkin pie. Tom appears as Mincemeat Pie, threatening to invade waterways and choke off marine life by silently attaching himself to Pleasurecraft. Mike interrupts Tom's soliloquy to take in what's happening down on Deep 13, where all of Forrester's guests have keeled over into their Thanksgiving meals. It turns out Pearl has poisoned them all as a token of reconciliation towards her son. But since this is Pearl we're talking about, she also tells her son how much he clearly needs her help, so she's staying. Forever.
So that's what happened the first time the episode was aired, but they recorded entirely different host segments for every other airing of the show, so here goes. Crow and Servo have tasers for their personal safety, and Mike unexpectedly frightens them. Meanwhile, Pearl has moved in with Dr. F and is embarrassing him every way she can. First up, a trombone recital. Dr. F tries to do the girl with Ipanema, but it's been a while. Crow, on the other hand, can play the trombone smoothly, though it does sound suspiciously like MIDI. If only Dr. Clayton Deborah Susan Forrester had been the daughter Pearl always wanted. After the short, we get to watch the short again, but this time with Mike as the frustrated composer, Gypsy as the frustrated wife, and Crow and Tom as the bespectacled angel. Gypsy's wishing gets a little out of hand. And then after some movie, Pearl tries to get Dr. F to apologize for the high school incident. Eventually, he gets so frustrated that he pulls out a knife on his mom. And she pulls out a gun. That's fun. Towards the end of the movie, Crow tells the rest of the gang that he has, quote, lain with Blood Beast, and he's pregnant. Mike thinks Crow is lying, but Crow assures him,
Mike, I'm crowning right now as we speak.
And then he presents a list of his demands. Oh, when will it be his turn to get all the perks that pregnant people get? Afterwards, Crow is still complaining. Not only do pregnant people get all the breaks, but so do babies. When? Oh, when will it be Crow's turn? He keeps interrupting as Mike tries to read some letters. Oh, well. Now back in Deep 13, Pearl is babying Dr. F, and he doesn't like it. See, Crow? Grass is always greener. The end.
I gotta say, the Turkey Day episode skits are way better.
Sure. I mean, especially if you've seen the entire Turkey Day marathon beforehand.
Yeah, otherwise I understand it wouldn't have made a lot of sense, but I gotta say, like, that's the one that I had, and that's the one that I had recorded, and when I checked out the, I guess, official ones, they just seemed a little bit afterthoughty, not very well considered.
Well, they really hinge a lot on the whole Pearl embarrassing Dr. Forrester trope.
Yeah.
That they leaned into for season 7 that I don't think worked.
What I liked about what they set up for the character in the Turkey Day marathon was that she was very detached and uninterested. And I think that was done hilariously by Mary Jo Pehl. And I just kind of wish they would have kept that going, where she's just kind of milling around, being vaguely disappointed by her son while he tries to deal with that.
Do his job.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't know. I found these skits really hard to watch, and I didn't appreciate what they brought to Dr. Forrester's character. And I don't know, it's also weird. They sort of explain it in the Turkey Day sketch, but it's weird that Mary Jo looks, if anything, slightly younger than Trace and Dr. Forrester. So, and they do make a joke about how she's had a bunch of her
cracks filled or something like that.
Yeah, sanded off, I think is something Crow says. But nevertheless, it is a little weird. They don't quite pull off that dynamic. I don't know. But nevertheless, I know that season 7 is basically your favorite season.
It has a lot of faves in it. It has Laser Blast. It has Deathstalker and the Warriors from Hell. It's hard to say it's my favorite because it's only 6 episodes, but I feel like they were really on their game script-wise for the movies, and I found that season so impressive and therefore so sad that it was shortened so dramatically compared to the other Comedy Central seasons.
So now that you've revisited 701 in all its various flavors, is this still one of your favorites? Is this hold up?
Mostly. Some of the jokes feel a little dated now, like the kind of jokes about the 50s being kind of square and sexually repressed. I feel like that wasn't really true, like actually they were, if anything, kind of an oversexed decade in a lot of ways. It was just like, but there were certain ways that the outlets were different. And I think Karina Longworth makes this point really well in one of her episodes of You Must Remember This, that especially in like A Girl Can't Help It, that opening sequence that's so infamous. It's just very like, you just see like this eruption of like cartoonish sex. And like the sex objects of women were just so kind of like inflated and strangely like they looked like they were about to float away, and they had high squeaky voices, and it's a very strange way of like embodying that male desire, like cis-het male desire.
Yeah. Do you find the short to be just bristling with the sexuality?
I do, and I think they play with that, but I mean, it just also feels like it's coming from a place of kind of Gen X, like, haha, look at how they can actually be open about sex, which, I just feel like seems a bit like that was, I think, what the 80s and 90s told themselves about the 50s, but it wasn't necessarily true. And I think we've just come to a more fuller understanding of what those decades were like.
Sure. And it's no longer that, cringing at your parents.
Maybe. Yeah, you're right.
Which is what it is for a lot of these cast members, right? These are people their parents' age who are acting weird about sex.
That's a good point. But otherwise, like, I was still laughing through this whole movie, especially Night of the Blood Beast. Like, I think when MST3K is the best is not only when they're riffing, but they're adding to the movie, like, another layer of plot that they'll move through, and they do that really well in Night of the Blood Beast. Like, they create this whole story of NASA having like a flatbed truck and being like this, farm operation. Or I love what they do with Donna, which is strange because they, the character of Donna is a nothing burger, right? She's just kind of wandering around, but the actress looks so confused about that. I think rightfully so, because she's like, what is my role here? What am I doing besides taking pictures? That they kind of turn her into a dummy, and that could be misogynistic, but it's just so perfectly playing off what is there that it just feels true to the character in a strange way. Like, one of my favorite moments is there's this quiet moment when they're just thinking about, the dead astronaut and trying to figure out what's going on, and she's in the background and Crow just goes, "Look, a frog."
That was a good moment. Although, so my problem, I guess, and it wasn't a huge one. Like, I enjoyed the episode certainly, but my problem was that I kept seeing things that were going to become worse in the sci-fi era. And part of that was the way that they dealt with Donna, the photographer woman, who I felt like they insisted was dumb and vacuous. And it's sometimes hard to tell, like, because the way that they're reading the text, so to speak, can inform how you read the text. So because they're reading her facial expressions as dumb and vacuous, you think, yeah, she looks dumb and vacuous. But then I thought, wait, does she? Like, I had to stop myself from listening to them for a second, so to speak. And I looked again and I wondered, wait, or does she look concerned because a friend of hers is dead and they're exploring, this mysterious situation, and she has no idea what's going on in that sense. Not, I don't know my role, but this is a weird and mysterious circumstance. Now, I'm not trying to claim that she is a great actor. She's not. She wasn't in a lot of other films either. But I'm not quite sure that she is as dumb as Mike and the bots, especially Mike, are making her out to be. And there's a few scenes later in the movie where they're talking about some stuff, like scientific stuff, like his blood pressure. And Mike and the bots are sort of not paying attention to what's going on. And they think that it's just scientific mumbo jumbo when they're just talking about, systolic and diastolic numbers, which are just normal blood pressure readings. And it's just like, are you even watching this movie? I don't know. I get frustrated sometimes at this insistence that the movie is dumber than it actually is that Mike sometimes plays with.
That's interesting. Like, I really struggled over this because, especially with Donna's character, I'm like, this could be considered misogynistic, and is it? Because I still think it's funny, and I think maybe it's because it's rescued by the fact that there is one other woman, and they don't kind of treat this universally. Like, it's not like every woman is dumb or put into a box, but it's one of those weird moments where you're just like, is this okay? And I kind of decided it was, just because I feel like it was more a failure of the movie to figure out what they wanted her to be. It just felt like because the movie had made her sort of this confused, wandering creature, that they were kind of playing on that. Like, just she's kind of floating through and just commenting on what she's doing. Like, there's one moment where they had some really weird blocking where they're all standing around and talking about what's going on because John has just woke up, the astronaut, and she's in the back and she just kind of steps into frame a little bit more. There's no reason for her to do that. And so Tom is just like, hey, wait up.
Yeah, I mean, they're very good at making jokes around dumb characters. And a lot of those jokes do land. And I'm not trying to say this episode is canceled because of potential misogyny, just that it's something that they turn to really quickly and something that this series would get worse about as it went along in the coming years. At least we can all agree that the short is delightful.
It is. It's fascinating too, right? It has that energy that I feel like you really only get with these kinds of 50s shorts, where it's just like, it has so much optimism for, what consumerism will be able to bring to people, and such faith in progress, that I just felt myself envying, like, people of the 50s. It's like, yeah, that must have been a really nice, space to live in, to actually believe this. Now, of course, we know, not everybody in the 50s felt this way. It was a terrible time for anybody who wasn't, a white heterosexual couple. And even then, it was not great for half of that growth. But it's just, I can remember feeling some of this when I was growing up, and it's just not there anymore. It's just not possible to be this optimistic about the human condition anymore. And I just kind of like to exist in that space for a bit.
It's also just a baffling piece, right? I mean, mostly because, I don't know about you, but it took me several viewings of this, even with Pearl's hint before the short begins, to realize that this is an ad for phones.
Yeah, they're just spattered in, but they never at any point say, aren't phones great?
Yeah, there's so much else going on to distract you from the phones, in addition to all the other kitchen appliances. But then there's this other plot, and you get invested, let's say, in the songwriting, and it's just, what is this about? Why are we watching this? And it turns out, it's because phones are great, and there are new exciting designer phones that'll be very futuristic, which we'll talk about in a bit, I suppose. But it's so, I don't want to say coy, but it's so indirect. It's so not about what it's supposed to be about. It feels like the car ads that were being made in the late 80s, early 90s, around this time, the Infinity car ads with Jonathan Pryce in them, that did not feature the car at all, but just really artsy shots, like it was a perfume ad.
I can't remember if that ad campaign was considered successful or not, but it certainly got people talking about it. Whereas this wasn't an ad. I'm trying to figure out how this would be presented to people in the 50s, because it's too long for a TV spot, right?
I don't know. It's not a short you'd wheel out in the classroom. It's not something that you'd send out to the, maybe it's something you're sending out to the salespeople to get them all excited about how to frame the new lines of phones. But maybe that's weird too, because
there's not and this is how you sell it. There's not that pitch feeling. The instructional feel is not there. Yeah, it's just this baffling little concoction that I just can't help but love. It's so sparkly.
Well, I mean, we should keep talking about this. You're here after all, and we got some 50s movies, and in particular a short that really likes to imagine what the inside of a house looks like.
Indeed. Let's go back, 70 years to 50s interior design. The Corner Corner. Well, I mean, this is ostensibly about trying to sell phones, but these phones are being situated into these designer spaces.
That keep changing.
Especially in the bedroom.
Yeah, the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room, all the major homes of the house are there that get major redesigns as we enter into the bold new era of color film in the late 50s, and the future is on our heels.
And I think that's the real takeaway of this is the 50s loved color. I think there must have been some new methods to bring in dyes into different kinds of fabrics and materials because they just seem to have gone riot with all these new color options, especially like teals and purples, primary colors oftentimes. I actually was surprised by the kitchen because the kitchen is ugly, really ugly, the yellow. But at the same time, like the bedroom, though, goes through all these different designs. And that was another thing, like the 50s era, as far as I know, as an amateur, was not monolithic in terms of what the 50s looked like. But the ones that we tend to see, especially in these movies, are the kind of what is now known as mid-century design, like kind of sleek, very horizontal furniture, a lot of wood and teak, and playing around with that kind of atomic design that I now has become kind of synonymous with the Fallout video game series.
Sure, amongst other things, but yes.
But they also show like that wasn't all. Like when they start off in their rather unfashionable but adorable kind of dollhouse home, like, you still had the kind of Victorian feel with lots of lace doilies and things like that if you wanted to go that way. Especially the sequence in the bedroom where they go through different looks, like they have the dramatic, like deep red kind of sexy look with the browns, or they had like my favorite, the prairie school ginghamy oriental kind of look.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They had the racing car beds one. It's just like the stylish look. I actually thought that the transformation of the living room was actually kind of least impressive, but you got that mauve, which I love, that mauve that was kind of brought into a lot of 50s looks with that works so well with the brown teak. Like it's funny because you look at these and they don't. We're so far away from it, and this is something that happens with design, that it actually seems kind of refreshing and stylish to look at 50s decor again. And I mean, like, the mid-century look is all the rage now, and I'm just wondering, like, when that shift into respecting the 70s is going to happen, because I still feel like shag carpeting and brown everything is kind of a joke that people go to, but I'm like, I bet that comes back, it'll, in some way, that might come back in the next decade or so.
It might. Do you aspire to live in a house designed like the houses in this short?
They have a very breezy feel to them. Like they seem like good places to walk through, if that's a strange way to put it. But in my heart, I'm a Victorianist, so I kind of still go for my curlicues and buttons on furniture. Like this is just a little bit too. It almost feels like a hotel in a strange way. Like, it looks nice to look at, but it doesn't look very comfortable to sit in, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, the best part of the 50s, they can't present because it's the 50s and the Hays Code, the bathrooms. Because they usually had like the pink tile and the coordinated colored like toilets and bathrooms. And those were really the thing that I feel like if you, especially when you're renting, you often end up with one of these spaces. And it's just like, just keep it. It's amazing, like you don't want to mess with a pink bathroom. Their boldness with color on appliances, I feel like I want that to come back. I'm so sick of stainless steel. I want a pink fridge,
Well, I think you could get that. There are a few companies that do that still, I believe.
And you see that enthusiasm, like ostensibly, in the phones, right? Because the phones here are all these different colors, and it's just like the phones are really supposed to be what is the focal point here on all the different styles that are presented in different rooms.
Yeah, so phones are weird, and phones were especially weird then because for quite a long time, everybody had basically the same phone, more or less, and it was black. You've seen it. It's the most common one is called the Model 500, and it was a thing that you would rent from the phone company. So it was like your cable box. You'd have to pay a monthly fee for it or something. And then by the 50s, you start seeing the introduction of other shades of colors, and then a kind of explosion of colors by the time this was coming out. In 1957, they start distributing pink phones. Ooh. This is before the Princess phone comes out, that sort of curvy number that you might also be familiar with.
The telephone that lights up at night. That's
Yes.
the Princess telephone.
So, yes, if you think of old telephones from the 50s and 60s, you're thinking of either the 500 or the Princess phone, most likely.
And another point is that the phone gets feminized at this point, right? You have the change from the very respectable black kind of office phone that can be used in any setting to thinking about phones and talking on the phone is something that is distinctly female, right? So you have the kitchen phone that is on the wall. You have the princess phone that lights up at night in the bedroom, like all these places where women would be talking to their friends, making purchases. Like then it becomes a trope, right? Like the mom on the kitchen phone with the extra long cord, gossiping while she does various chores. Like this becomes something that we're seeing like the beginning of that here, right?
Yeah, and you're definitely seeing that in all the advertising that comes out around that time for these new color phones. They're all pictured with women on the phone because, of course, they're the ones home all day. Men are at work, and therefore they have their office phones, and that's an entirely different setting.
And they've already cornered that market, right? That they have the phones there. Now it's time to move into all these other rooms because it usually was like you only had one phone.
Right. And now that they're trying to get you to rent several phones, which is very profitable for them, then, oh my God, these ads are amazing.
They really are. We should put some in the show notes. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I'll put a link in there. There's a really great one. Mrs. Brown loves beige.
So I don't like these movies, and there's a lot of them. The kind of 1950s dull, leadenly paced sci-fi movies where an alien comes to Earth and try to wreck it up. Like that's just, there were so many of these movies, and I find them all to be incredibly tiresome. And of course, because there were so many of them and the rights were relatively easy to get, we get a lot of them in the run of MST3K. I consider this one to be the best they did in terms of I don't think the movie's good, but I think the treatment they did is probably the sharpest. But because we've all seen so many of these, you see a lot of tropes start to come into play. Like it is unquestionable in the 50s that aliens are hostile. There's just no other way to put it. And even when they come in peace, they think they're coming in peace, their intentions are always destructive to humanity. And the fact that they couldn't even conceive of the idea of a friendly alien is kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Why were they stuck in that groove,
Well, because it's all a metaphor for communism.
Of course, right?
I mean, I don't know. That's how a lot of people read a lot of these films. Obviously, it has to be a bit more than that. But yeah, you get this idea that aliens are going to be baddies, that they're invading in that sense. And so, of course, that's just what aliens are. They're things that invade. So,
because there's just so much excitement about going into space and what they would find there. But there's also this, I guess it was a reactionary response to this, like what is happening if we go into these spaces, like what are we unleashing on ourselves? And yeah, maybe it has something to do with communism and just it's like this idea of imperial states kind of pushing each other. But I also just think there's a lack of imagination that if you see something and it's just as sophisticated as you, it must be hostile, right? Because I feel like because
you're hostile. I mean, this is what America would do if it found a place and moved in, is that they'd start throwing their weight around.
Because this is what the West had done for the last 500 years. It was just like so I feel like this is just an inability to think of anything other than hostility and conquest when it comes to somebody who's stronger than you. Because obviously they have to be to be able to move around in space easily, right? I was trying to figure out just kind of in the time frame when that shift changed, maybe aliens are friendly. Maybe, in fact, they could be our guardians or our helpmates or something like that into a better world. Because in cinema, really the first one that I can identify is 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I was going to say that's what I would have pinned it as.
Yeah.
And then you get your E.T.s and your Max and Me and the like.
So what shifted? Because we were still basically afraid of the commies, right?
Hippies came around, and then they started getting older and having weight in Hollywood and throwing that weight around, and you got hippies on the scene like Steven Spielberg and whoever made Mac and Me.
I'm sure that was it, but apparently, and I'll put this in the show notes, but History.com has a theory that...
History.com?
Yes.
Well, with that kind of URL, you know it's trustworthy.
They were a magazine, right?
History.com is the History Channel.
That's what I meant to say, sorry. The History Channel website, where it mentions that what happened was these movies were very influential, and then suddenly you get the claims of alien encounters.
Sure. Although those aren't the most friendly encounters.
Well, some of them were. So the most famous one was George Adamski, who says he met a friendly visitor from Venus in the California desert. And he became the hero of a budding UFOlogy movement, where people just started to kind of encounter aliens that, according to Adamski, radiated a feeling of infinite understanding and kindness with supreme humility. Now, this sounds like a drug trip, right?
Sure.
Which is also things that started happening in the California desert in the mid-century.
That's true.
So I'm thinking, yes, your hippie psychedelics might have had something to do with the I bring you love shift in alien encounters.
Although George Adamski, or however you say his name, he put out those books in the 50s.
Right. But I mean, you're getting psychedelics in the 50s too, right?
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in terms of their influence on popular culture, like those were, I'm being told, bestsellers in the 50s. So why didn't they make a dent on the movies then?
It's really hard. Like, there seems to be a gap, right? Like, the 60s doesn't seem to be quite a time for thinking about aliens very much, but I feel like the History Channel might have been onto something. Like, it's something that was below, it was folk culture that maybe was starting to change the aliens trajectory rather than pop culture.
I don't know. I'm still thinking it might be post-Vietnam stuff about the questioning whether we should be invading all these places and how we should approach foreigners might be taking a major shift in American politics after the disaster of the Vietnam War and the fallout from that. But
listeners, what do you think? Why aliens be friendly?
Why did aliens start getting friendly in the 70s in films? Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any big theories about it. I'm not some History Channel bigwig with crazy hair and great ideas about ETs. Why are you bringing the History Channel into our home?
Because they brought us George Adamski. So another interesting trope that we see in this movie that I don't know, I'm sure it's existed before this movie. This can't be like the launching point of a couple things: alien impregnation and male pregnancy.
Yeah. So the lovely website TV Tropes, which, isn't the most exhaustive and authoritative site, but does often collect all sorts of examples of things.
And comes up with really kicky names for them.
It does. The male pregnancy page is called Mr. Seahorse because that's the thing that happens with seahorses, is that the males carry the young, I believe. And the act of getting impregnated is called Face Full of Alien Wing Wong. But I couldn't find any films that they list that predate this movie. That doesn't mean they don't exist. Sorry, there's a 1940 film called Turnabout, which they refer to as a gender bender comedy, in which, quote, a husband and wife seemingly returning back to normal after spending most of the film in each other's bodies until the ancient Indian idol, oh boy, that made the initial switch confesses that he's screwed up and informs the husband that he's now pregnant. But, that's kind of a different thing than what's going on in this movie.
Yeah, that's a body switching thing that's also well established in cartoons and whatnot.
Yeah, this is about a man getting impregnated, and they spend a lot of the movies thinking through this, although they don't make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, they really don't. Like, is he going to explode or is he going to push them out? It's just like...
Well, there may be some trickiness there. Yeah, they don't address any of that. And part of that is because, well, he died and is now moving around and talking again. So that maybe seems like the bigger miracle than him getting pregnant. But yeah, it seems fine.
Yeah, he seems fine, but plants that seed that, like, once they gestate, he is going to not exist anymore. Like, he's going to either be brainwashed or his body's going to explode. Like, it's not clear. The alien is not clear on that. But I think that is the fear of alien insemination that goes forward. Like, it's not just that you become pregnant, it's that it takes over your body like a parasite and destroys you. And that's what ends up going on into like the Alien series and stuff like that, right? You've been infected by parasites, which is also something that comes with fears about pregnancy, right?
Sure. But again, like, I think one of the weird things about this movie is that, okay, he's pregnant, and this is clearly a sign of like the way that the alien is going to intentionally change humanity and change what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. But none of the other people seem bothered by it. Like, they don't play out, there's no, oh my God, you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm. How can this be? You're a man. Yes.
Yeah, it's treated as if he's got like a blood infection. That's sort of how they express it. You've got weird cells in your blood and they're getting bigger and this is bad. But there's no, what an abomination for a man to become pregnant. How hideous is that? How weird is that? I wouldn't want to be carrying those babies. And Mike Mike and the bots are the only ones who are making the jokes about that romantic night you must have had with the alien up in space.
And yet that subtext is in the movie too. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, in text, it's just like it's treated as a parasite, an infection. But John, the astronaut, he gets feminized, right? And just like, I haven't seen the movie Junior, but I've seen clips, and the joke is like suddenly he wants ice cream, suddenly he feels faint and wants massages, it gets very emotional. And that same thing happens to John. He starts fainting a lot, he gets very emotional, like he's acting differently from everyone else because he's acting like kind of an emotional woman.
Yeah, he's sympathizing with the alien, which is something you're not supposed to do. And Junior, of course, it's referenced in the episode, but Junior, of course, the 90s comedy with Arnold Schwarzenegger getting pregnant.
Yeah, and one thing I wonder if because he's been feminized, he's shirtless. Like, I was just like, this is a 1950s movie. Why is he not wearing, an undershirt?
Yeah, he's shirtless the whole time.
It's very strange. Like, I'm just like, how is this allowed?
And even like, okay, sure, they bring him into the lab, they remove his astronaut outfit to do some medical tests and an autopsy on him and so forth. And then like, he wakes up, fine, he's shirtless for a scene. That's normal enough. But he never puts on a shirt for the rest of the movie until maybe the very end. I forget. But like, he's super shirtless for a long time in this film. And like, I'm not freaked out about it the way mostly Mike is. but nevertheless, there is a sense of like, what are they doing here? And you're right. They may be using this to emphasize his masculinity or to contrast his masculine body with his more feminized concerns about alien life forms and not just shooting to kill like, the Molotov cocktail making dudes in the rest of the squad are. Uh-huh. But at the same time, again, there's never a moment when the other people question his masculinity directly. There's never a scene of like, John's acting strange now.
Well, there is. Like, he's just like, we're not sure if he's been taken over by the alien or not. And they'd say that to his face. It's like, we don't know if you're reasoning properly.
Yeah. But it's not, you're acting like a woman.
No. Well.
And they never really make a joke like that. It's not even, like I think we've seen more jokes about gender insecurity in like Rocket Ship XM or some of those other films than we do here with a pregnant man.
It's surprisingly... Like, we were talking about Donna and her position, but like, it's a surprisingly progressive movie in terms of like having women in important roles, having an impregnated man not be subordinated or like turned into a monster. It's yeah.
Well, I mean, he is turned into a monster, but but nevertheless, like, it's not the jokes that I would expect from this movie aren't there, and that's weird.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 side dishes to go with today's episode, Night of the Blood Beast. Go, Beth, go!
Once Upon a Honeymoon takes its name from a slightly more famous movie, the 1942 Cary Grant Ginger Rogers vehicle, Once Upon a Honeymoon. I don't know, is that stealing? It had been 14 years, and Cary Grant put out a lot of movies. Who can keep track of them all?
Our camp angel Wilbur is played by Chick Chandler, a character actor who had bit parts in about 1 million movies and TV shows, including It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, an episode of I Love Lucy, and Naked Gun. Not the Naked Gun, but the 1956 Western Naked Gun, in which he plays Shaky Wilson. We gotta get these people to stop recycling names.
The rotary-faced portable phone that the Angel Wilbur uses to talk to his boss was one of Once Upon a Honeymoon's fantasy prototypes. It didn't actually exist. The first working portable phone didn't come out until nearly 20 years later. Built by Motorola, not Bell Telephones, the unit weighed 2.5 pounds and was as big as a shoebox. It allowed the user to talk for 35 minutes and required 10 hours to recharge.
Night of the Blood Beast got one thing right about the infamous space race of the mid-20th century. It was deadly. Now, I talked about this a bit in our episode on the crawling hand, but although NASA frequently boasted, before the Challenger explosion in 1985, that is, that they'd never lost anyone in space, that claim was a little misleading. In fact, and very sadly, several men were killed in the early years of the U.S. space program, including a horrendous training exercise for the Apollo 1 mission, in which the entire three-person crew died in a fire.
One of the casualties of the U.S. space program was astronaut candidate Robert H. Lawrence, who was killed in 1967 in a training flight that was simulating a steep glide technique that was later used for the space shuttle. And the aircraft responsible for that crash? The F-104 Starfighter. Just a reminder that the Starfighter was not, in fact, a good jet.
The making of Night of the Blood Beast was certainly no honeymoon. Martin Varno, the 21-year-old that Roger Corman had hired to write the movie, eventually sued for insufficient wages. Corman refused to pay, and as a result, he was not allowed to use Writers Guild of America members on his films for years.
Varno would later take Roger Corman to formal arbitration again when he learned that Roger's brother Gene had received writing credit for the original story. Varno won, but was told by American International Pictures that removing Gene Corman's credit would mean recalling all the prints and changing them, and that would cost thousands of dollars.
Pearl Forrester repeatedly refers to Crow as Art, a running joke in the show that goes back to Season 2's Jungle Goddess. In the sketch My White Goddess, Joel introduces Crow as Art Crow, which is almost certainly a reference to the Honeymooners' Art Carney.
Did the funky alien costume look familiar? That's because it was used in another Corman stinker, an MST3K episode, Season 3's Teenage Caveman. In fact, the two movies were shot within 2 weeks of each other. However, a slight modification to the costume was made for Blood Beast when someone on set suggested the monster suit's hooked nose might be a bit problematic, so it was cut down slightly to resemble the parrot-like beak we see in this movie.
Early on in the movie, as Donna is taking pictures, Mike says,
Vanna Bork-White on the scene.
Hey, let's unpack this one. I brought up Margaret Burke-White in A Shell of 13 for The Skydivers. She was a notable war journalist, and if you didn't look up her stuff back then, well, here's another chance. Of course, Mike is conflating her with Vanna White, who has been turning and or tapping letters on Wheel of Fortune for, oh my god, 39 years.
When they're figuring out how to kill the alien, one of the guys mentions a Very pistol, which confuses both Mike and the photographer.
Well, a Very pistol has an engulfing flame plus a delayed explosion.
Very
Better than a lead.
Very pistol?
Edward Wilson Very, an American naval officer in the late 19th century, popularized the particular style of flare gun that now awkwardly carries his name.
When looking at the astronaut's blood under the microscope, Mike offers this riff.
They mean to win Wimbledon.
This, of course, is from an early Monty Python sketch in which blancmange, which is to say puddings more or less, from outer space invade England and start eating tennis stars. Turns out, they mean to win Wimbledon.
And finally, when our photographer is attacked by the alien, Crow shouts,
Sigmund the Sea Monster's got me!
Sigmund the Sea Monster comes to us from Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, yet another Sid and Marty Krofft show from the mid-70s. Two boys playing on the beach discover Sigmund Ooze, who has been thrown out by his family for refusing to scare humans. Anyway, he was played by the great Billy Barty, who we discussed in our episode on the undead.
And that's time. Happy Turkey Day, Beth.
Happy Turkey Day, Chris.
You know, we probably should have saved this episode for a Turkey Day someday, but after doing the weird KTMA episode of Gamera vs. Zigra just recently, which had that weird alternate opening because of a rerun thing, I just wanted to do the other episode that had the weird rerun switcheroo in the middle of it. But I think we might as well talk about the Turkey Day marathons now anyways, because we had to watch one in order to get the context for today's episode.
And this one is a very special one for me because it's my first Turkey Day, and really, I would say probably my first kind of deep dive into MST3K.
Aww.
Yeah, I know. So This was fall 1995. I'm trying to put myself back there. I was 13, so I'm pretty sure it was the shift from elementary school into high school. That summer, I had seen Bride of the Monster on Comedy Central for the first time and were like, what is this? And got into MST3K. But at that point, I was just watching them every week. Some were good, some were bad. But this was my first time, like, let's watch a lot. And I'm pretty sure, like, I left for school that day, pressed the record button on my VHS and just walked away, hoping for the best. I'm not sure if I asked my parents to switch out a tape at a certain point before I got home. There might have even been me coming home for lunch somehow, even though, no, it couldn't have been that. So I couldn't drive at the time. But it was just like, I was really excited for this event. I didn't realize it was something that happened every year.
Right.
And the lineup, like those movies, I had them on tape, watched them a lot, and they're pretty much all my favorites, except for The Crawling Hand, which is garbage. But
yeah, fair enough.
But like Manos, Mitchell, Outlaw, Skydivers, Star. Like, this is an amazing lineup.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic collection. I also was reminded there that, of course, you would have had to go to school that day because you weren't getting Thanksgiving off.
Nope. It was Canada, so it wasn't a special day. And so, I came home, did what I could to continue watching at that point. So I got to see like the special Poopy episode where they basically do a pretend infomercial. Also a lot of fun. Maybe we'll get to talk about it sometime. But yeah, I just was drenched in it. So maybe that's one of the reasons I like season 7, because I was there for it.
It's interesting because I started watching... I don't remember when I started watching MST3K, actually, but it solidified similarly with the Turkey Day from 1991, the first Turkey Day, which I also, taped as much of as I could because it went on for over 24 hours. I had to sort of strategically pick episodes to miss. I mean, I didn't know what episodes were going to be on, but I would put it in, record as many episodes as I could on the worst quality possible, and then take the other episodes as sort of lost causes, give the VCR a few hours to cool down, put in the next one, and grab the next 3 episodes, I believe. So I had a bunch of them on tape from Turkey Day 91, and I had the feeling at the time that, like, this collection of 12 of the, I believe, 15, 16 episodes that they showed that day, this'll do me. This is going to be enough MST3K to last me a lifetime, which did not quite turn out, but it absolutely solidified my sense of being a fan of the show, and also gave me the great awkwardness of dashing around Thanksgiving celebrations as a teenager, trying to rig up all the recordings for the next several years.
Right.
And so I also was watching in 95 when all these were aired. I think that these sketches for this one are probably the strongest they ever did. I mean, I have a real fondness for the bumpers and the ads that happened in the original Turkey Day.
Right.
But this is pretty great. The through line is pretty sweet. And you get all of these classic characters coming back. You get, you get your Mr. B naturals, and you get your Kitten with a Whip, and you get your Jack Perkins and Pitch and Michael Feinstein.
What is the thing with, because like Jack Perkins is there because they had done the MST3K movie hour, so that character had already been established as part of, like, the cast of characters that can come back, but Michael Feinstein. what was he there for?
You'll have to wait till next year to find out.
Okay.
But he makes an appearance in the Best Gamera episode.
Oh.
He comes in and he performs the Gamera song in Gamera vs. Giron.
Oh, I see.
So that's why he's a callback.
Okay.
Well, that has been a lot of conversation around Night of the Blood Beast. It's been a lot of fun having you back on the show, Beth.
Thank you.
Do you have one last thing that you want to bring up before we wrap things up?
Well, sort of. So the stuffing and potatoes debate.
The old stuffing and potatoes debate.
Which I was kind of astonished. Like, I enjoyed the sketch, but it's just like, stuffing? I always found stuffing to be disgusting. Like, it's cooked inside the turkey, which is kind of weird. And potatoes could be dressed up in so many wonderful and amazing ways. And the suspicion of potatoes that has existed in Western culture for a while. So it was just one of these weird things that I got to read when I was doing my PhD about potatoes and how they became kind of, especially in the 19th century, 18th and 19th century, when basically the British Empire was taking over Ireland and doing a lot of not great things to the people. Like, potatoes basically became like kind of a metonym for the Irish people. They were kind of brown and lived in the dirt, and it was weird the way that the Irish people were treated like the things that they kind of sustained themselves on. And potatoes themselves were kind of suspect because, of course, the staple diet for English people for the longest time had been wheat, and wheat is this kind of communal product. It has to be harvested and milled and baked, and it's just like all these people have to be involved in making it something that people eat. It's actually hard to make. Whereas potatoes, you stick it in the ground and boom, you got potatoes. And they found that very suspicious. That something that was, and like potatoes are like, they're very nutritionally dense. In a lot of ways, they're a superior staple to wheat. And then, so there was this idea that like these potatoes were aiding this of this stereotype of Irish people just kind of breeding out of control, and that the potatoes were kind of abetting that in a weird way. So yeah, I think for a long time there was just like this kind of cultural suspicion of potatoes as being this like self-sustaining dirt crop for bad people.
So you're saying the stuffing versus potatoes thing is actually a racism?
Yeah, or a classism. If probably
a bit of both, really.
Yeah, but it was just like there's a suspicion of this potatoes that is allowing the wrong kind of people to proliferate.
Huh.
It actually reminds me of that picture by Van Gogh before he kind of got into his groove of like the potato eaters.
Right.
Like it was a peasant food, and for that reason, like it was viewed with suspicion by the ruling class. It's surprising. I was really surprised that they came down on the stuffing side. What about you?
Well, so as somebody who doesn't eat meat, Thanksgiving is a celebration of side dishes often. And so, as they end the sketch, both is the right answer. But also I've had plenty of stuffing that was made separate from the bits that went into the bird. And stuffing is wildly variable. Like, I've had good stuffing and I've had terrible stuffing. I've had good fancy stuffing and bad fancy stuffing, and good basic stuffing and bad basic stuffing. And it's all over the map, frankly. You never know what you're going to get. But when it's done well, it's really good. Potatoes are just good.
Yeah.
They're less variable. I mean, you can do a million different things with potatoes, and there are cookbooks out there just filled with recipes strictly for potatoes. And what a joy it would be to try all of those recipes and just have 7,000 different styles of potatoes lined up before you. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you are team stuffing or team potatoes, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at @itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up with anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/88.
So, Chris, I unfortunately will not be here for the next episode, but what are you two going to phone home with?
Well, we're not watching E.T., but instead we're going to be watching Season 4, Episode 21, Monster A Go-Go, with a short Circus on Ice.
Oh, this is such a good one. So this one's funny, right? Because I think in early times, Monster A Go-Go was considered the worst movie before Manos came around.
A few episodes later, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought, even after Manos came around, that Monster A Go-Go was a far worse movie.
And speaking of phones, they have the wonderful moment where the phone ring is made by somebody off camera.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. No, that's one of the great many things that doesn't happen in Monster Go-Go. I'm looking forward to revisiting this movie, which is a rough one. I remember it being a real rough one.
Well, Circus on Ice is good. At least you can look forward to that.
Monster Go-Go is very special. Circus on Ice is a lot of fun. It'll be a time. I don't know if you're excited to be missing out on having to watch Monster Go-Go again.
I'm happy I don't have to watch that one again. They did their best, but boy.
Well, thanks again for stepping in when Adam was a little bit busy. It's always great to have you back on the show.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. My brain is spinning. I have to go think about potatoes some more.
All right. Well, you do that. But until then,
I wish that all our living rooms were all redone because I've been staring at them for way too long this past year.
and Daddy, don't let your babies grow up to be space aliens. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Is he going to explode?